All right, so let's make a full introduction for our listeners. Good afternoon, Mike. My name is Claudio. I'm calling you from Washington, D.C., from the studios in Fairfax City. We're very humble and grateful that Mike Pride accepted our invitation to our show. Mike, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. So let's go what's going on in the world right now with the pandemic, inability to go out for some people. Some people believe in the vaccine, some people don't. Touring musician like yourself, you make money when you tour, so it's hard to, be at home all the time when you have a family and to support. How's the COVID has affected your life, your creativity, and how you hold it up, man?
Yeah, well, I'm holding up well, thanks. Definitely, I think it's been largely good for my creativity because I have a lot of private students, and I was teaching them all in Manhattan, and I live about an hour and a half north of Manhattan. So that's 3 hours to 4 hours of driving a day I don't have to do now. And I can invest that time in working on different projects or, just being down here in my workspace and being involved in the music rather than involved in driving a car or getting from place to place. So I've been teaching online for those students that would do that, and that's been enough to be cool. But I've been making a ton of music with different people in different groups, separated. And I've done a little bit of in-person performances, mostly some outdoors concerts when they're available, a lot with Jamie Branch's trio, which did quite a few things this past year. And we did a concert at Roulette in Brooklyn that was nice, but they limited it to 50 people in the building. They did a really nice job. The only other time I've played indoors since March of 2020, the very next morning I got a call that I had been exposed to COVID and to quarantine and all that after just one regular concert. So I'm not in any big hurry to get back into playing any local clubs or stuff in the city at the moment. My children aren't vaccinated yet, but they're getting their first shots in a few days. So that once they're fully vaccinated, that will ease me at least a bit or a lot, and I'll look forward to that. But it's been cool to be here and, be with my family and be around a lot. I used to only be here in the early morning to get them on the school bus, and then I'd get home well after bedtime. So I have a lot more time with my family. And so, yeah, it's weird. It's weird finding ways to fill a day like that 3 or 4 hours of driving that I don't have. And then in between, commuting between people's houses. Yeah, it's been weird trying to find a routine. And I don't think I have found one yet that works, but I get a lot of time working on music super late at night like I would have in the past, but now I can do it midday as well. And I'm not sure I'll ever find a routine before I have to start going to the city again 5 days a week. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, enjoy where it lasts, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be hard to go back to.
That's right.
Going in the city like that, it's going to be really hard, but it's also better, financially and being able to travel and things like that and plan on that. It's hard to even know. I've been totally uninvolved in trying to book any type of performances of my own since the pandemic started. Just for one, I don't live in the city. I live out of the city. So it takes a little bit more effort to put something together, and it's a lot more of a time commitment for me to drive in and do it and then pay a band and all that. So I certainly look forward to life getting back to normal so that I could resume booking concerts and in-person performances, which hopefully will happen a lot in 2022, hopefully.
That's the plan, man. That's the plan.
Yeah,
At least here in Washington, D.C., I think all the venues are open now as of September, and you need to prove that you were vaccinated or you did the test 24 hours before.
right.
And some people believe in that. Well, if you want to see music, those are the rules. That with freedom, this country, freedom comes with responsibility. So whether you believe on the stuff, just get the shot, man, get it over with, and then enjoy music and protect your family or whatever that happens to be. So
Totally, I'm cool with all that stuff, and the more that people take care of each other, the more we can start to do things.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm a computer engineer. I do this for fun. And in the company I work for, we were vaccinated early, I think in March or April. So I'm okay, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I enjoy going to concert, right? So I see close to between 40 and 50 shows a year. So
yeah, wow, great.
So I need to get the vaccine,
Yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah.
were you born like in a musical family, and then how old were you when you began, before drum, maybe taking piano lesson or guitar lesson?
Yeah, I was in a musical family. My oldest brother, who's much old, I shouldn't say much older, make him feel bad, but he's old. He was in his late teens when I was born. So he's a professional musician still and always was. So that was always normal to me. My next older brother up was involved in competitive choral singing and was quite successful in that. So I was always aware of that. He was also involved in musical theater, which I was as well as a little kid, basically until puberty. And then I thought that was not the coolest thing in the world. And I got out of musical theater, but I loved it before puberty probably, and or hormones. And my mother played clarinet and listened to a lot of music in the house.
Yeah.
My dad did not show any proclivities towards music whatsoever. I think he probably doesn't care about music so much. But yeah, a lot of music in the family. And I started playing guitar, studying with my older brother when I was 4, I think, 4 or 5, started taking guitar lessons. Did that for a while. And then in middle school, I started playing trombone. And after a year or two, I wanted to switch to the saxophone. I wasn't allowed to because there were already too many saxophone players. So I joined the drum department in 5th or 6th grade, just because another friend of mine who I liked was in the drum section. So I decided to go with him. And then that stuck. And, I studied just the stuff you would have to in concert band. So, glockenspiel, snare drum, concert bass drum, and then started getting into drum set stuff, in junior high school with like jazz band type stuff. And always had private teachers, always had some pretty nice, great foundational private teachers that my parents were nice enough to send me to every week. So always studied, but yeah, I was never too serious about it until maybe junior high. I started thinking about the possibility of being a musician, and my older brother all along had made his living as a musician, so it always seemed possible. But I thought I understood jazz in some way because of playing in quote jazz band, which involved very little improvisation as it is. And then when I eventually moved to New York, realized I was super uneducated and unexperienced as a jazz musician, but I looked this old when I was 20, so people thought I was much older than I was, so I quickly got to play with some older people and found my way quickly, I think.
Were you were you part of any bands in high school? You formed a band with your buddies? You make a little bit of money when you were, I don't know, 16-year-old playing weekends or?
Yeah, totally. So I played in a lot of hardcore bands. So I always did that. And then I also made lots of kind of experimental noise music in my parents' basement. Lots of the time by myself, lots of the time just making pieces on a cassette 4-track that I used all the time. Like I was probably making recordings and compositions and sound collages, maybe like an average of 3 to 4 hours a day, every day from the age of 14 until 20. I really, really loved it. Still do. So I would involve my friends in that who were not necessarily the most musically educated people. So we would kind of goof around, and then I would experiment with sounds, kind of. So I always did that, and I played in like regular hardcore bands that were, somewhat popular and would open up for a national hardcore band that would come to Maine, where I grew up. Occasionally we would open up. So that was cool, but I never really did anything of my own aside from what I did in the basement. I did one performance one time at an art gallery in Portland, Maine that was, I'm sure, extremely bizarre. but I never felt the need to have to do that. All along, however, I would substitute for my drum teacher for musical theater productions, for like wedding bands, things like that. So I did make, looking back now, I made great money as a musician on the weekends, playing weddings or musical productions, theater productions. I just didn't realize how lucky I was when I was that young. It was before the DJ thing kind of took over so far as functions and things like that. And I guess being in Maine, I didn't realize that people pay a lot of money to get married in Maine. I grew up in Maine, so it didn't seem like a big deal to me. But then moving to New York and seeing what people were getting paid to do the same work I was doing poorly at 14, I had it really, really good. So I was fortunate to do really crazy shit and then do really normal wedding band stuff with my older brother and whatnot. And
Yeah, good for you. Do what you like and make some money.
yeah,
What's wrong
exactly.
with that?
Yeah, I don't even remember what I spent the money on. I'm sure CDs and records and
These
movies.
records
Yeah,
or
yeah,
a
books.
new drum set, a new snare, or.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my parents never were not buying equipment for me, so yeah, everything was filtered back into it, into my musical education in some way. I was never a smoker or a kind of party kid. That was never my thing. So I would see how much money my friends would spend on whatever, booze or cigarettes or
Hmm.
weed or whatever, and then my weekly expenditures for that could be zero. So it was, they could spend their money on that, and I could go out and buy like heavyweight champion of the world John Coltrane box set on
Of
Atlantic or
course,
something. So
of course, yeah.
good,
What
good
kind of
trade.
music, when you were like 18, what kind of music were you listening at the time? It's, I don't know, to throw some name, was Pink Floyd important to you, Led Zeppelin, Genesis, any of the band, or you were in the more hardcore stuff?
I was definitely into like straight edge hardcore music. So, are you familiar with what straight edge signifies?
No.
So, straight edge was like a hardcore culture. A lot of it kind of coming from DC with Discord Records and like Fugazi and Minor Threat. So these were hardcore bands who were, animal rights. They were vegan. They wouldn't wear leather. No drugs or alcohol. Like very morally defined musical community. They would draw black X's on their hands to signify I'm straight edge. So that's what I was into. However, I was also into kind of gothic industrial music, and so a lot of my friends wore like black nail polish and black eyeliner and dressed weird, super weird. I did too occasionally, but then I would also go to these hardcore shows where it was more of a tough guy scene, and I was always bigger than my art friends in some way, so I fit into both of those. Um, However, I was always into Frank Zappa because my oldest brother is a huge Zappa acolyte, or was. I think he still is. So I was raised around it, and I never was into Pink Floyd. I never really was into Led Zeppelin beyond taking it in as part of music history. I still haven't really checked out Pink Floyd, to be honest with you. Not in a real way.
Yeah.
So I was a hardcore Zappa fan. Listened to the Zappa records that I could without getting in trouble on my stereo. The ones that I couldn't, I would listen to with my, like Joe's Garage, I would listen to with headphones on so my parents wouldn't know I was listening to it. It was taboo in my house because they knew my brother loved Frank Zappa, so they didn't want me to go make the same mistakes, And so I was into that. I was also really into Eric Dolphy when I was a teenager. Still am. Like the stuff I'm into now, is the same stuff I was into when I was a kid. It's just there's more that I'm into now because there's more I know about. So I learned about Eric Dolphy because the first album I ever bought, and I was really young, like 12 or something, was Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. And I bought that because I just remembered the piece. Are you familiar with much of Zappa's music?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so the drum fill that opens up Peaches and Regalia. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Like that drum fill always I think it's Vinnie Colaiuta, but such a beautiful drum fill. So I bought that album. That led me to buying Weasels Ripped My Flesh, which had a song on it called the Eric Dolphy Memorial Barbecue. So by the time I was 13 or so, I had bought Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy just based on the reference. I started getting into trying to like get into Stravinsky and Edgar Varese and all this stuff that Zappa would kind of espouse. I investigated fully, and then I was in this hardcore community and skateboard community, so people started listening to Mr. Bungle, and that opened up a lot of possibilities musically in my mind after hearing Mr. Bungle music, which led to like Naked City and John Zorn's whole world of things. I listened to a lot of Tim Byrne when I was in high school, and I still love Tim's music, and Tim's such an awesome person. So I had, pretty similar taste to what I have now. I loved Jimmy Scott. I still love Jimmy Scott. But yeah, a lot of the touchstones I was totally ignorant to. I had never checked out Bob Dylan, period, until I started working with Jamie Saft, and then really started checking out Bob Dylan, and now it's one of my favorites. But I had never even checked out Bob Dylan at all until I was maybe in my 30s. So there were some huge gaps.
Yeah, that guy, Bob Dylan, is a gifted genius type of guy. So you need to get into it. I mean, if you don't know, right, some put a record in front of you, and they cover the cover, so to speak, and you don't know what it is. But if you begin to listen to the lyrics, the guy is very, very famous and very, very good.
Yeah, no, incredible.
I don't have the same. I wouldn't have the same experience that you have because English is not my primary language. So you need to understand English well. I think it's a contractor coming to my house. Give me 1 minute.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's
okay. Yeah. I was saying that I wouldn't have the same experience with you because you need to understand English very well to understand why Dylan is a gifted guy like Paul Simon or Garfunkel, all that kind of stuff. Right. To really understand the lyrics, but the guy is very, very famous.
Yeah, and so I mean, at the same time that I was kind of playing in hardcore bands or different kind of weird rock bands, I always had a band of my own that I sang in, and sometimes would play like xylophone in a rock band, just weird experiments. But I was also into a band called Primus a lot when I was a teenager. Like I was really into like anything that was considered classic jazz. I was just very, very interested in because I think I was educated in that way by my older brother, like that this was the gold American music or something. So I always had a respect for it and always had a huge history of listening to jazz stuff. But yeah, I avoided the Pink Floyds and the Grateful Deads and and Kiss and all kinds of things that were ubiquitous. I think I intentionally avoided, probably from whatever type of bad attitude I picked up from people like Frank Zappa or John Zorn, like the kind of snotty, elitist, anti-elitist attitude certainly really appealed to me when I was a young, angry kid. So I was kind of maybe proud of my ignorant gaps when I was younger. Now I'm very curious to fill them in, and I'm kind of curious about checking out some Pink Floyd records. And still, the idea of listening to Grateful Dead is really hard for me, but I'm open to the idea of it. But so I always liked classic jazz, and Eric Dolphy and Art Ensemble of Chicago were always huge for me as a teenager. I was exposed to Art Ensemble of Chicago, a record they had called, I think it was just called AECO. It had one of Roscoe's paintings on the cover. I specifically remember hearing that at my brother's house when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old. And I remember the album cover, and I remember sitting down on his couch. He's an audiophile, so he had an amazing stereo system. So it was common that you would go to my brother's house and like he would play you music. And I remember sitting on the couch listening to this album, and it must have been one of their like kind of small instrument percussion pieces. And it just totally, it blew my mind, and I loved it from a young age. So, but at the same time, I was listening to MC Hammer and dancing around to "You Can't Touch This," and
good for you. Yeah. You were exposed to jazz? You listen to any kind of jazz rock stuff like Jean-Luc Ponty or Pat Metheny or Pat Metheny Group or Mahavishnu Orchestra, all that kind of stuff?
Certainly. A lot of that stuff I avoided for the same snotty reason that I avoided Pink Floyd and the Grateful Dead and things like that, because they were so popular, especially amongst younger. We're the only musicians I knew when I was growing up, or younger, aside from people I knew through my brother or my teacher. We're very much into like that type of progressive fusion stuff. And at that time, that was really hard for me to get behind stylistically. So there were a lot of empty spots in there for me. But yes, Jean-Luc Ponty I knew a lot about because he played with Frank Zappa, so he was in part of that bubble. So I was that flippant with it, like, oh, Zappa's okay with it, I'm gonna check it out. I loved Captain Beefheart from a young age. My kids love Captain Beefheart; they think it's hilarious, and they think it's a bee fart. Like for a long time, they thought it was a bee farting was the guy's name. It's ridiculous. I never thought about that. But yes, the album that I really liked by John McLaughlin, that I still, if I put it on, I'm sure I still will think it sounds amazing, was called Extrapolation, with Tony Oxley playing drums, but like grooving. Must be like really early 70s, maybe. And John Sermon playing baritone sax. And of course, I can't remember the bass player, which is really wrong of me, but a bass player who sounds great. Do you know who it is?
No, but I know exactly the album when you're talking about.
Yeah, it's an amazing album.
That's one of the classic albums. Yeah.
So I love that. I love the second Mahavishnu album. I can't remember what it's called. Was that Birds of Fire?
I think you might be right. Yeah.
Whatever one was the second one. I liked that one a lot. But probably that type of listening for me was all like coming from like Zappa guitar solo albums, like Shut Up and Play Your Guitar and things like that. Yeah, I was more very much focused on 60s Blue Note stuff, and Impulse stuff, but like coming strictly from like a Coltrane or avant-garde side of things. And then I think I always considered the 70s to be of bad taste or something, which is hilarious because I didn't know enough about it. But at the same time, I was very, very much a super fan of Anthony Braxton. So his 70s music, I think, is the pinnacle, actually. For my listening of his stuff, like that 70s stuff, totally blew my mind that he was doing, and a lot of the AACM and forward people. So I guess that was the 70s music I was listening to.
Good, man. Yeah. It's good that people have, different tastes. Otherwise, if everybody read the same music and the same books and do the same, we'll live in a sad and boring world, So
Yeah.
there's people like jazz, there's people that like Latin music, there's people like stuff from the 80s that I do, and so it's good there's people and one of the guys that I interviewed a long time ago, he told me, well, forget about the band. There's good music about music, If you like good music, you need to check it out a different range, and from band one, you go to another, and by the fact that we have a Spotify, you can, come across a band, and then from there you can discover more and more and more than ever in the story. So for me, I always go back to the classic, right? For me, the Pink Floyd, the Led Zeppelin, the Jean-Luc Ponty, the Pat Metheny, the Genesis, Pink Floyd, but the Depeche Mode, but I like 100, 200 different bands that I like, depending on my mood, depending on the day, depending on what I do.
Yeah.
And so
I think there are these signposts as musical listeners, regardless of if you're a musician or not. If you're really a listener, and as you know, as somebody who clearly you love listening, like not everybody does love listening to music, but those of us that do, I think there are signposts in our kind of self-education, and it's the beginning of a new way of listening to music. And it doesn't mean that anything else means any less. It's just that here's another language that we're starting to understand, and there's this big branch. So, I think a lot of that just depends on a generational thing, and when you're first hearing things early enough so that you're not putting your own prejudice on them or social prejudice, So, and I guess the only thing that would make the things I was exposed to and things I had proclivities towards liking or disliking, the only thing that separated me from anybody was just that I had a serious musician in my family who was intentionally trying to educate me in a way that he felt strongly about. And some of my other friends had musicians in their families, or their dads were musicians, and they had a different, they didn't have the same signposts as me. A lot of them had more like, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, Rolling Stones, which was great too. And those people were into different things. Those people played rock beats better than I did, for a while. And I was better at being weird, or something like that. And then I think to do some really new or futuristic or like absurdist music, it's something you can either do or not do. And I think a lot of the people that I came up with who were great musicians, and where I grew up, we had lots of time. So a lot of my friends would spend 4 hours a day working on music. It wasn't just me. There was a great little community I came up with of super talented, intelligent people exploring different arts and stuff. Probably because we had so much free time, and this was pre-internet, and this was Maine, so we didn't have a whole bunch of cultural stuff going on, so you did your own thing, or you just wasted away, and some wasted away, and some did their own things. And but a lot of my friends, I think it's really hard for them that I came up with, to go into more improvisational territories, just because their background, they weren't exposed to it. They were exposed to the classic rock bands. And so it made it harder to go into those territories. If I wanted to improvise with people, I would find myself being drawn to improvise with the like performance artists or noise musicians, because they wouldn't wear their references so clearly. And I'm the type of improviser that if I'm improvising and somebody plays a really clear reference, even if I love it, it's kind of like dropping a barrier on the progress that's going on in my mind. And that's my own problem. And it's up to me to decide how to respond to that. And I think the way to respond to it is to not respond to it in most cases. But it took a long time to get the restraint, and still working on it, to not have to pocket it back at them,
Yeah, several musicians I interview, they told me that it never occurred to me, but because I'm not a musician, right? I'm a consumer of music. So a lot of people tell me, well, I don't listen to much music because I don't want that to influence me in my next record, my next gig, or when I'm playing, or I'm thinking about, if I'm a drummer, I'm thinking, that something from the Toto guy, or from Paul Vertigo, for Antonio Sanchez, or from Simon Phillips. I interview all these drummers, and because I'm not a musician, I felt weird at the beginning. Why this guy doesn't want to listen to more music? So give him ideas, not stealing, but give ideas. But then down the road occurred to me, yeah, that's the reason.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple reasons. So I think a lot of it is just that drummers, every instrumentalist, but certainly with the big name drummers, they're each an individualist in some way. Like the disparity between Steve Gadd and Dave Weckl as musicians on the instrument. I'm not an acolyte of either of them, but I grew up reading about them for sure, and know about their work. It's very unlikely that you're going to ever mistake them. You're not going to think a Steve Gadd track is Dave Weckl or vice versa. And you're not going to think a Carmen Appice track is Terry Bozzio, or, it's very much an individualist thing, and it's super keyed in because it's not like we can establish ourselves as individuals as the lead voice. So it's not so simple to establish yourself. You're not going to necessarily have a solo that anyone really cares about to follow the musical language there in like a, inside pop music context or whatever. So I think it makes sense for those type of people, like, Simon Phillips probably really doesn't want to listen to Vinnie Colaiuta right before he has to play, because he doesn't want to play any Vinnie Colaiuta licks. Not that he can't, it's just that's Vinnie's shit. And Simon's got his shit. And like everybody has their thing. And that's awesome. There are improvisers like that who have a specific thing. And I'm sure I have some specific things, but I always felt like I couldn't be one of those people who does a specific thing. Like I want to refract and reflect everything, whether it's the sound of, me putting my glass down or the wind blowing outside. Like I want to reflect all that all the time. And so I always used to respect those type of people more. Nowadays, I used to feel the same way. If I was going to do a concert, I wouldn't want to hear anything, let alone some like serious music right before I had to play. I wanted to be of myself, clear. Sometimes I might still feel like that. Sometimes, the other day I had to do something and I wanted to get a little bit more pumped up. So I put on like a new R&B record and just to get me pumped up. I didn't think about the drumming at all. Just like as you would listen to it, I listened to it as music and it made me feel good, which got me ready to do some work. But I've certainly been around musicians. I was one time at Tony Malaby's house doing a session, and I think I brought up Gato Barbieri, and it totally fucked Tony up, and he was like, man, why'd you have to bring up Gato? Now I'm going to have to play all this Gato shit, and I won't be able to help but sound like Gato. And then we played something, and when we were done, he was like, see, I told you, you ruined it. And I'd never experienced that before, where just mentioning somebody's name was that much of a oppressive force on somebody of the same instrument. But I get it now. I was young. I get it. But that type of stuff doesn't bother me. We could, I would love to listen to Tony Williams and then go up and play. I'm still going to play my stuff, but, it's just like checking in with these masters. I feel strong enough in my own voice and ideas and the way I hear things that I never feel the urge to play somebody else's stuff. And if I did, I wouldn't even know it. It's just like, for me, it's just one big well of information, and I can grab onto whatever I want, whatever inspires me in the moment. And it's not referencing anything. It's part of one long thread. And that thread is made up of possibilities of everything I've ever heard my entire life, even if I judged it as being poor or badly done. It's still in there.
No, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Feel free to elaborate your inspiration or memories or of the legendary punk band MDC. I know that early in your life play a big fact. I didn't know the band at all. I needed to look it up, and it's not my style of music. But as we say before, there some people don't like the jazz that I listen to, or I went to see 10,000 Maniacs last night, right?
Yeah.
And I'm seeing John Fogerty tomorrow. So why? Because I like the stuff. A lot of people don't like it. Why you listen to heavy punk and heavy rock and gothic is good, But feel free to, all my questions are open-ended. So feel free to elaborate. I'm always, I have like a set of, my interviews are different in the sense that I have like a 3 or 4 set of questions I always ask, but they're open-ended. I want to know the musician, right? If I want to, if I'm interviewing Peter Gabriel, right, or Phil Collins or yourself, I can listen to your record and ask you the same stupid question that everybody asks you, right? So for me, I want to know the person behind the instrument, before the drummer in your case, or behind the piano. That's what my questions are kind of open-ended. I want to know, from your point of view, from the musician point of view.
Yeah. So MDC, which I'm intentionally wearing their multi-death corporation hat.
That's right.
If it ever heats up in my basement, I'll just wear this MDC. Yeah. This is from when I was in the band. This is a gay anarchist skinhead gash. Yeah. So that's another one of their shirts, even though it doesn't have MDC in it. When I first moved to New York, some of the first bands I did were bands with people. I didn't know anybody when I moved to New York. I knew nobody. I didn't move there. There was no community that came with me from Maine or anything. The only person I knew was a trumpet player named John Carlson, because I had studied with him at a jazz camp, and the great drummer, and John Carlson's a fantastic trumpet player, and the great drummer Matt Wilson. Those are the only 2 people I even knew, period, and just from studying with them. So the first musical relationships I had in New York were based on me working at Manny's Music, which is like a kind of legendary Times Square music store that's now owned by Sam Ash. But so I worked there and started playing in a band called the Acetaminophen with a guy who worked in the audio department. I worked in the drum department. Through that band, however, I met Jonathan Moritz, who's my best friend and family to me, and we do duo records, and we had a jazz quartet called Evil Eye, and he plays on some of my From Bacteria to Boys albums as a guest. Or does he? Did I just say that? And he actually doesn't. He might. He subs in that band. I don't know if he's on a record. I shouldn't have said that, but whatever. It's fine. He's fine with it. So, but one of my best buds, he played in that band, and another guy that played in that band was this guy Kentaro Saito, who was a Japanese guitar player, who I started a band. He started a band with me called Dynamite Club, and we were a band for almost a decade. We traveled all over the world, a lot of traveling. Made 3 records, and through that band, I met a guy he goes by the name Albatross, but his name is Al Bazin. He is a drummer. His aunt is Ruth Underwood, who the great mallet percussionist from Zappa's band. So that immediately made me fascinated with this guy. And he would tell me stories about taking a nap underneath Ruth's marimba and things like that. So anyways, I loved Al immediately. He had been subbing in MDC because their drummer went to prison in the late 90s with no sign of getting out. Yeah, he is out now, and I think he's been out for about 10 years, and he's back in the band. So anyways, he was playing in the band. I think he did 1 or 2 tours with them around Europe. I'm not sure for how long, but he recommended me. I was young, looking for things to do. He probably assumed I knew a lot about them. I had never heard of them. As much as I was into hardcore music, I kind of looked down on punk music as being, I don't know, I don't want to say anything, but I didn't respect it. I do now. I was uneducated about it, and I didn't respect it at all. So MDC was not in my brain at all. I knew about the Dead Kennedys, and I liked them. I loved Bad Brains. Those bands were both super close with MDC, so it's weird that it never passed my radar, or my radar never picked it up. So I was just asked to audition for them. They had a tour coming up, a 90-day tour. This must have been in 2003, I think, in the spring of 2003. So I just went and auditioned with the original members, minus the drummer. I didn't prepare at all. I didn't listen to any of their music. Just showed up and kind of jammed and faked it. I knew what a punk rock beat was. Like, I could do that. So I just kind of bullshitted through the whole thing, and they must have sensed that. And Ron, the guitar player at MDC, is a very brilliant guy and intelligent and sober and all the right things. And he immediately picked up on the fact that I was a serious musician. So they had me come back the next day and audition again, but that I go home and like listen to some of the music. So I actually listened to, it might have been 28 songs, something like that, and I transcribed the drum beats and wrote them out completely, and came in the next day with a big book of all their drum parts composed, which they'd never seen anything like that. That's ridiculous in a punk rock band, but they loved it. And I went on tour with them like 5 days later for 90 days straight, and was reading out of the big book, like on stage at a big punk rock festival in front of 10,000 people, and I've got a music stand with laminated sheets of music paper being turned, really out of character for that music, but I was also half their age, and I think that made me endearing to them in some way. And they were certainly getting to a new point in their lives where they were trying to be more sober and more healthy, and maybe reflect more positivity, aging, and or trying to age well, I should say. And so I joined the band, and I learned about them as I went. I really didn't know anything about them. In hindsight, the music is great. It's very florid. There's lots of information. They're reflecting all kinds of references. They would talk to me about hanging out at Studio Rivby at Sam Rivers' place. Meanwhile, they were, doing this punk rock music, and progenitors of a certain style of thrash, a certain style of strumming the bass particularly, they were big on. So as I went along, I learned about them, and I, grew to love them as people or hate them as people. In this case, there's nobody I hated in the band. I loved all those guys. and I'm sure it's mutual. And I did it for a couple of years, and then it just had nothing to do with them, nothing to do with the individual band members, nothing to do with the audience or anything like that. It just wasn't. I started to think, like, this isn't why I moved to New York. I didn't move to New York to play. Even if I'm in a famous punk band now and it's amazing, there's all these people and people are super excited to be around us, and that's bizarre to me. And exciting. It in the back of my mind always is like, well, this is not my thing. Like, I moved to New York to be an artist. Like, whether I eventually became a filmmaker or a painter or a musician, like, I was always interested in filmmaking, visual arts, and music, and whatever happened would be cool. It just so happened that with college, music was definitely the path, and going to college or to a university was the way for me to have at least enough parental support that I could go to school somewhere and have enough money to eat one frozen burrito a day or something like that, and that was fine, and that's what I did for a long time. So I joined them, and I know much more about them now that I'm not in the band, and I respect their history so much more because I've had time to investigate it. And making this record, I Hate Work, I really got to know the music a lot better, because the new record is my reimaginings of certain songs of theirs that I really loved playing for all different reasons.
Absolutely. We'll talk about the record in a couple minutes. How you end up, getting picked up or being associated with RareNoise Records? I have interviewed a lot of, I don't know a lot, but maybe 6 or 7 people from that. It's a very different record labels. I mean, they're very particular in the thing that they like, So how you end up coming across? They approach you, you approach them. How you met Giacomo?
Well, I knew them on the periphery because one of my best friends, somebody I worked with an awful lot, is Jamie Saft, and he started doing records with RareNoise Records. So I was aware of that through following my friend's work and just talking about it. And it seemed like a great thing that was happening for him. Through that, I made one record with him and with Joe Morris that was called The Spanish Donkey. The Spanish Donkey is the band, and the album was called Raoul. We did that for RareNoise Records, and that was a great experience for all of us. And the product was amazing, and really, really happy with it. So, naturally, I'm looking to work with that label again in some context or whenever possible, because it was a good experience. But also trying to be careful about not soliciting things to people who don't necessarily want to be solicited. I tend to take it slow. But I, at one point, decided that I was going to make this MDC record, the I Hate Work record, and I thought Giacomo would be interested in it. From conversations we'd had, or because of the way it sounded, or because Jamie Saft was involved, and proposed it to him. He was definitely interested. I think in the end, this was like maybe in 2017. In the end, I was too eager with it, and maybe I pushed it too hard. I don't know. Whatever happened, he didn't end up putting it out. And to be honest, I just kind of sat on the recording. And I was just a little too idealistic and a little too naive about how the business works at the time. And I naively took it as somebody being interested in something, meaning they were going to put it out. So anyways, my own inexperience bummed me out, and I kind of sat on the record for a couple of years. And then last year I started making a record, the 3-Layer Cake record that Giacomo put out, with Mike Watt and Brandon Seabrook. And as I was working on the record, I hadn't spoken to Giacomo in probably a year. And I just thought, wow, this seems like something that would be really cool for RareNoise Records, and that would be great for us, and that would also, I think, be good for his label. So why don't I propose it to him? And then he, as I watched some of your interview with him, so as he said, like, it was kind of serendipitous timing of me reaching out to him, and he was very excited for that project. And then out of the blue, a week or so after agreeing that we would do 3-Layer Cake, he asked me if I still had the I Hate Work record, if he could hear it again. and I sent it to him, and he was very interested in it, and asked if he could do that as well, and I was super excited about that. So yeah, a long time. I mean, the Spanish Donkey record was, trying to see what year it was. I can't. Yeah. So the year is like hidden. Sorry, a little. And the year isn't on this either. I don't. Okay, so I don't know. I'm gonna guess that from doing this Spanish Donkey Raoul record, which has incredible artwork on the inside, which I'll show you in a second, to getting to this I Hate Work record was probably like 7 years or something. I feel like, but
Very nice, man. Wow.
very beautiful. But so I just kind of kept him in the back of my mind, and I guess he kept me in the back of his mind, and then it's right when it's right. So I feel super excited about it now, and the way that the 3-layer cake record went and was supported by him was wonderful, and the I Hate Work record, working with him has been wonderful. So I love it. So it's a great roster to be part of, because he really takes care with his work. And I think his label's coming from a very personal place and reflects his interests and his signposts. So that's interesting, and makes it strong. I think it's nice. It's it's not like you're part of a label that put out dozens of records and pushes each of them a little bit, but maybe where you fit, you're just like another fish in the pond. Whereas with his label, he really cares about all of them. He really does a full job on each of them, and it's a particular, somewhat eccentric viewpoint of modern music, and one that I relate to, being that it's not denominational, or it's a secular view of music. Like it's all
Sure.
possible.
I listened to, I think the album is coming up next week,
Yeah,
visually,
on
and
the 19th.
I listened to a track here and there. It's very good. I
Cool.
really like
Thanks.
it.
Thanks.
It's very good. Yeah, as we mentioned before, right? Giacomo is very peculiar, very particular in the stuff that he likes, right? You might be Peter Gabriel, but he doesn't like the stuff. It's worthless to him, right? Or
Right.
he's very eccentric and very picky. I like this style, whatever that means, and I wanna work with people under this umbrella. If not, I'll talk to me in a year from now, or whatever. So
Yeah, I think also, like, all the releases that I know of on his label, and from speaking with him, about the albums that I've done for him, is that he really likes delving into the mystery of the albums, like what does this album reflect, why does it exist, and the mystery of listening to it, where each time you listen to certain albums, you can hear more and more things. And I certainly try to. I love making albums. I love making records just as much as I love playing in person with people. And I love having little secrets in records that, like secrets like the 30th time I listened to Blood Sugar Sex Magic, a Red Hot Chili Peppers album that was really big in my youth. Like the 30th time I listened to it, I realized there was like a Go-Go Bells in the background or something like that. I love that stuff. I absolutely love it. And I think he does too. And I make records for people like that who like to unwrap it. You got to spend time with it, and it will hopefully reward that time with more little musical gifts inside.
what is the advantage for you to go in to be under a particular record label versus now that people know your music and you have different parallel projects to do a self-release and go on your own? Is financially more feasible working at a record label like him instead of you going on your own? Now you have proven, you have several projects, you have tour and all over the world, and can you go on your own, or it doesn't make sense for you to do something?
I mean, you certainly can, especially nowadays. But the thing is, if I do it all on my own, it suffers, because as much as I would like to think that I can be on top of everything and do just as thorough a job as a real record label can do, and I consider RareNoise Records a real record label, meaning they invest in their, in their product and they invest their time into their product. And so many labels I've worked with, I've been on over 100 albums, and many of those I was involved in on the business end. So many labels will put out records and then invest no time in it, and it becomes your job to invest your time into it. So if that's the case, yes, I should just do it myself and not let anybody be involved and let it be all me. And I do that a little bit on my Bandcamp page. I attempted before the pandemic started to do 12 albums that were all, they still will happen, but I meant to make 12 albums in a year. They would all be self-released, self-produced. And I got 6 done in the pandemic, and having a family and not wanting to have people over here, it stalled out big time. So I'll have to continue well past my mid 40s maybe. But so I do that. But I still feel like if you really want to get a project out and to have more people at least be exposed to it, having a real record label handle that, in my case, is a positive, a huge positive. Because, like you said, I've certainly been around and doing this stuff a long time, 20 plus years now in the city. So those people that are already invested in my work are going to know about whatever new work there is, just because I am that way as a listener. If somebody I enjoy following has a new work, like, they don't need to tell me, I know. So I know those people will know about it anyways. But where my own ability to get the music out there to new people lacks is that I just don't have the time or the ability or the intelligence to really know how to do that effectively. Whereas the people Giacomo has doing PR, that's their job. So it's better for me to have that situation, especially on a record that maybe has the possibility for more mass appeal than some of my other pieces, other work. This album is like the most pleasurable listen of any album I've done. It's less sonically confrontational, and intentionally so. It's taking extremely fast, caustic, chaotic music and distilling it down to, the goal was to 1/4 density and 1/4 tempo. So creating not a wasteland, but certainly taking the giant, dense housing complex and taking it down to like a nice little farmhouse or something with 40 acres.
Gotcha. How are you doing in Bandcamp? Are you make a little bit of money, like every month, every week or so, to
a little bit of money,
a little bit of the bills?
It goes towards, it all goes towards the bills. It doesn't pay any, but I'm very fortunate to have some subscribers who pay $5 or more a month to listen to as much as they want. Of that $5, I get like $3.50. So it adds up very slowly, but I'm grateful for those people, and I hope they're enjoying lots of music. And I get sales, every couple days things sell, and I have some people who consistently buy things. I get to recognize their name and their address, like, oh, there's this person buys a couple things every month, and I send them little extra things or something. So it's cool. It's not, I think
it helps up a little.
It helps. I just recently looked at like the current year sales total, and as a lump sum, it's great. There it is. So just doled out day to day over the course of 365 days, it feels like nothing. But it's way better than it used to be, where I was relying just on selling physical CDs through PayPal on MikePride.com. It's way better than that. So I'm happy with it.
And the other thing that musicians do, right? If you're doing a gig in the city and you're playing with great people and it's going to be popular, you can bring like a suitcase of self-made CDs, and you can make a little bit of money selling $7 or $10. If you like your music, this is the best of this and this and that.
I did that a lot. In the like 2005 to 2010, I put out a lot of albums that I self-produced, and that I would have the CDs pressed, but then I would hand make the packaging, whether I had somebody silk screen them. And I love them all. They're all super particular, nice art objects, and I think they're all beautiful. It's a lot of work to do that. And then because they were handmade, I always wanted to keep them super affordable, so I would charge only $5. So I was making very little money for the amount of time and that went into them. I don't have the time to do that now, but I loved doing it, and some of them still have a few copies left, and people who get them are lucky if they want them. But I like those products more in many cases. You know, if somebody gives me an album and it's super particular looking and feeling, like it immediately piques my interest. Whereas if somebody just gives me another jewel case with the same kind of odd fonts and computer graphic-y looking situation, you know, it's going to be hard for me to open that one up and put it in and listen to it. So I personally like the artifact, the real artifact, not the mass-produced artifact. But in a case like with RareNoise, where the artifact, where the product they're making is of the highest quality, and there's so much care into the look of it, then that's a great trade-off in my case. So
Absolutely. If you know, your personal life, if you could go out with any drummer dead or alive to go to drinks in DC or New York, whatever happens, only one, who that person would be and the reason why?
Well,
someone that you haven't met with, so it would be more interesting.
Oh, somebody I've never met. Okay, so
Yes.
I was gonna say Paul Motion, but I'd met Paul Motion. So if it wasn't Paul Motion, you know, I would love to just be around a young Tony Williams. You know, how amazing would it be to be around Tony Williams in like 1965 or something, when he's like whatever 17 years old or something, and you know, the whole musical landscape is shifting around this young kid. That would be amazing. You know, I would. I'm sure it would ruin me for life. I would become just a. You know, I would be under such force that I would never be able to do anything but reflect Tony Williams. So thank goodness that never happened. But that would be fascinating. Yeah.
Get you. You have played in all over the world in so many venues, bigger places, smaller places, different cities, different countries. Is anyone or a couple of concerts that you look back in your life and you say, man, everything works out great. The equipment arrived on time, the light was great, the audience really liked the gig, and you know the lights were good. And any memories? Say, man, I could die tonight. You know, God keep me alive, but if I could die tonight, I'm happy with my life or as a musician overall.
Yeah. Hopefully, and this is sincere. Hopefully, I feel like that every concert.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and if I don't, then it's a bummer. But generally, at the end of every concert, like especially if I'm traveling, I should feel great about it, because hopefully I've put myself in a position where I'm not dealing with some bullshit business thing, and I'm not dealing with some logistical mayhem, and just dealing with the music. But yeah, I mean, there's no one particular concert that comes to mind. Like my mind's racing while I'm talking, trying to think of one. But the only thing that comes to mind, and this is probably not what one would expect to be such a dreamy experience, was I had the opportunity to do this piece, Drummer's Corpse, overseas a couple times. And a Drummer's Corpse is a piece for 7 drum sets, 3 vocalists, a guitar, and a keyboard. And it's super intense. And very long. It's like a 33-minute piece of torture. But the torture midway starts to feel really good. And there's an album called Drummer's Corpse. People can check it out. Mike Pride's Drummer's Corpse. But I got to do that in England, and I got to do that in Switzerland, and a couple other places. And that was just super rewarding because it's a very, very confrontational piece. And it's a very physically taxing piece. When I first conceived of the piece, it was kind of a joke. I decided I would write a piece that when I get to whatever point in my life I don't want to be alive anymore, I could end it by performing this piece. So it was like physically nearly impossible. Yeah, bringing that outside of the States and outside of like rock venues and doing it in a concert hall. Or in England, we did it in a plane hangar with like kids around and stuff, and it was totally amazing. But it had nothing to do with the particular circumstances, or even with the way that people received it. It was just the fact that I was able to, that this could even happen, you know, that I could, that it had nothing to do with what I did, but that there was enough people out there interested in this energy that we could have this amazing thing happen at all. Incredible. And, you know, I've had lots of great concerts with Pulverize the Sound, a band I play in with Peter Evans and Tim Dahl. Our last tour that we did, which I think was in 2019, playing the Ghent Festival in Poland. No, not the Ghent, not Ghent. In Gdansk, Poland, we did the jazz festival there. That was an amazing experience. The percussion assortment that they got me was mind-blowing. So I think I had like 2 concert bass drums, bongos, tam-tams, giant gongs, a drum set, a glockenspiel, like a ridiculous percussion setup. So as a percussionist, those concerts are always memorable because I get to play some gear I don't normally get to. And in that band's case, the more sonic possibilities, the more fun it is for us. Whereas maybe a jazz band having a set of chimes or something, or a couple gongs, it doesn't really change things up very much. But with Pulverize the Sound, there being a bunch of bass drums and gongs opens the possibility that I only play bass drum and gongs for 45 minutes, and that totally changes things from a drum set.
Oh, that's great, man. So I have only like two more questions. So what are the plans for the near future? Are you planning on booking some gigs for early, late this year or early next year? And anything that, and you have played in many bands. Are you, so as a musician, you prefer to play with, this band the first 3 months, and then the second tour with this guy, or do your trio, or do this or that is? Like 3-Layer Cake, or the Bacteria, the Boys, or Mike
Right.
Trio, any you like to do that instead of having a band that you guys play 3 nights a week instead of playing with different people from different countries?
Yeah, well, the playing 3 nights a week thing is totally impossible at the moment, just because all the projects I'm in currently, or most of them, people are situated in different places. So, 3-Layer Cake, Mike Watt's out in San Pedro, California. I'm here, which is close enough to Brooklyn that it doesn't make enough of a big difference. So me and Brandon are here, but Mike's out there. The Mike Pride Trio for I Hate Work, I'm here. Last I knew, the bass player was in Italy, and the piano player is in Maine. So the reality is that to do work in the city, I probably need to have a new version of the trio, that is people that are in the city. And but I would like to get the chance to play this music with those specific guys, which would be the touring version of the band. So yes, the goal is I need to put the feelers out there, and I certainly hope that I Hate Work will have some work next year at different festivals and such, or in 2023 if it need be. 3-Layer Cake I would like to tour with. Specifically, hopefully in the near future, 3-Layer Cake would be touring this I Hate Work record, and Pulverize the Sound, who has 2 new records that we're just finishing up. The world just needs to get to a place where I decide it's even worth investing the time in trying to do that and putting feelers out there. So, yeah, I'm still on kind of stall mode specifically until my kids are fully vaccinated. But also, and I don't want to waste 40 hours of my time to book something that could potentially just get canceled based on a world condition. Like that for me would be demoralizing enough that I would never do it again. So I'm kind of insulating myself from what could be a super negative situation for me to want to invest my time in again. So yeah, I love working, and I hope all these bands will work a ton. It would be interesting to have a season, like you're mentioning, like if I got to a place with a booking agency or something where I could say this month is available for this band and that band. Like you said, that would be great. But I've always just been everything at once as much as possible and just zip around as much as you can.
Yeah, hopefully you can, you can do your dreams, and if you look back now, you're in the 40s, and when you started around 20 years ago, look at what you have begun, and if you project yourself, well, Now I'm 60, and I have this conversation with this guy. When I was 40, I did that, I did that, and that. So it's good
Right.
to be a dreamer. It's good to have ideas and do what you like and make a good living doing it. I mean, for me, as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't play an instrument. I don't know how to read music, and I have this crazy idea. Well, I'm going to be stuck at home, right? As a software developer working at home, instead of listening to my own music and take a CD and take an album, what if I can create a radio station, for myself as a selfish person, listen to my own thing online, right?
Yeah.
And then now 100-something interviews later, and I'm going to be going to Germany at the end of the year to interview the best electronic musicians in the world.
Who are you going to see?
Huh?
Who are you going to talk to in Germany?
So I'm going to be interviewing all the best people in the Berlin School of Music.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
All the Tangerine Dream people that I have interviewed, Manuel Goshin, Michael Honing,
Whoa, nice.
people from Nashua Temple, people from Agitation Free. And then in May, I'm going to be going to London, and I'm going to meet with Eric Clapton,
Wow.
Peter Gabriel, Peter Frampton, and a year and a half, the idea was here, and now I make it happen. So
Yeah.
you gotta be a dreamer. You need to be a risk taker. Don't be a stupid, but a risk taker, and do what you like. That life is short, and you want to, at least my personal feeling, I want to look, when I'm 80-year-old, I want to look by my life and say, man, I did everything I want to see. I wanted to see, I want to talk to these 500 guys. I did. I saw 2,000 shows. I saw everybody I wanted to see, and I can die happy, So.
Yeah, exactly. See, I mean, with the pandemic life here, part of it is that the way it is now is very comfortable and enjoyable. My daughter's upstairs right now. Like, I'm around my kids all the time. My kids are 11 and 7, so they're only gonna like being around me for so much more time.
Right. Enjoy that.
Yeah, really, really enjoying the sweet years and considering myself very lucky to be here for the sweet years. So I'm not stressing the getting back out and doing everything, because at a certain point that will need to happen. And at a certain point, hopefully enough people will be moved by the I Hate Work record to say, like, hey, what do we have to do to come get you played? Like, that's all they got to do. But for me to devote time to reaching out to people after doing it this long, when I could just like go upstairs and, do a painting with my daughter or play baseball with my son, I would much rather do that than kind of humiliate myself by groveling at promoters' feet. But at a certain point, I'll have no choice but to grovel, perhaps. So,
That's
and
right.
I'll be okay when that comes.
That's right. Feel free, Mike. Feel free to mention your website and where people can buy your music, so the listener can buy music in your Bandcamp or on your website. Feel free to elaborate.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's MikePride.com, which is a website I've run for a long, long time. I'm not good at keeping concert engagements up to date on there at all, but people can see videos and see some of my art and, see a discography. If they're interested in my work, the easiest thing to do is go to MikePride.com. And the Bandcamp page has a lot of great music on it. Every album that I've done hundreds of, over 100 albums, all of them, except for 2 that I am able to publish up there, I have. So there's a lot of music up there from over 20 years, and some cool, products people can buy. That's the best place is mikepride.bandcamp.com or mikepride.com. And other than that, whoever runs my Wikipedia page does a weird job. If you're out there listening, you do a very weird job, but that's fine. So yeah, and if people are curious about something, they should just reach out to me. Like I'm nicer to people on the internet than I am to people in real life, I guess. So.
Right, man. All right. No, it's okay. Thank you very much, Mike. Have a good afternoon. It was very nice talking to you. Good luck to you, your career, man. Looking forward to maybe meeting you one day and, listen to the whole album when it comes out next week. And
yeah, excellent.
So far, I have seen great reviews from people, and good luck to you, man. Maybe we'll get together in New York one day and get a beer.
That'd
or
be
a
great.
slice of pizza or something.
Yeah, totally. Just let me know. That'd be great.
All right, man. Take it easy, man. Thank you very much. Man. I
Thank you very
appreciate it.
much. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.